Commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. What we find out yesterday? Well, I think what we all knew. Trump knew there was no fraud. There was no stuffing. There was no cheating. There was no shenanigans. There was none of the stuff that Rudy Giuliani was running around claiming. There were no nefarious plots to undermine him. Joe Biden didn't learn coding during the pandemic to just steal the election from him. No, none of that stuff happened. In fact, what we did find out yesterday is Trump knew he lost and decided he was going to lead the coup attempt anyway. And the best people, remember, only going to surround himself with the best people. Well, the best people were cowards because they knew too and did nothing. They did nothing, except, well, no, that's not true. That's not true. They did a lot. They were co-conspirators. They came along. They helped Trump. They didn't do anything to save democracy. They did nothing to save our system. They went along. Cowards. And this is one of those moments where, if you watched the big hearing and 20 million people did, good on them. And look, I'll be honest, I was surprised 20 million people did tune in. Now, all of the major networks did preempt their regular programming. In fact, ABC had the largest number of viewers, 4.8 million. NBC had 3.5 million. CBS had 3.3 million. MSNBC had the big showing on cable news, 4.1 million. Fox came in second by not showing it with 3 million, and CNN 2.6 million in third. Now, Fox, interestingly enough, Fox during that 2-hour hearing, so concerned that their viewers might get bored with commercials and just go, hey, I wonder what's going on over there at that hearing thing while these bad commercials are going on, decided not to make money during that 2-hour frame, decided to run no commercials, none whatsoever, keep their audience riveted right on the propaganda being shoveled at them. And for 2 hours from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern time, they decided to not take a commercial, not make any money, and thus make sure the faithful didn't wander and seek alternative messaging. That speaks volumes. I mean, it really does. It speaks volumes of me. I think they're concerned that someone might go, wait a second, I wonder what's over there. Wonder what Fox has been telling me all these years, if any of it's true. Now, if you watch the hearing, and we did here on the program, in fact, we broadcast it live, I'm struck by a couple of things. One, the brazenness of the groups that were there. The white supremacist groups, the paramilitary type groups, our fringe folk, and how they felt emboldened to have their treason, their sedition videotaped. I'm still amazed by that, because I always think back to what my grandfather always said. He always used to say, if you're messing up, make sure you're the only one who knows it. Because then you only have a 50% chance of getting ratted out, because you're only about half of the time going to tell on yourself. Somebody else knows, it's guaranteed. And they had a film crew, basically filming their meetings. Yeah. Now Fox, the Fox channel, They're not going to televise the hearings because I think this is them pleading the fifth. No, we're not going to say how complicit we are. On Monday, when the next hearing is, there's going to be a former Fox News editor who's going to be testifying. He announced that he's going to testify, this Chris Steerwalt. And what's interesting about Steerwalt is he's one of the guys who was instrumental in calling Arizona for Biden on election night 2020, which kind of led, from the way I'm understanding this, kind of led to him being, well, pushed out the door there at the F channel, because the Trump was not happy. Because Arizona, if you remember, was one of the key places that the Trump folk, the folks who wanted to steal our election, the seditionists, the coup folks, had really targeted their Georgia, to a degree Pennsylvania, but really there in Georgia. They really thought that they were going to be able to get that their electors put in place so that they could get it out of the hands of Congress and back into the states, where they could then, undo the certification process, get it back into the House of Representatives, and go this alternative route, this Eastman memo route. Steerwalt, interesting character. He wrote an op-ed right after leaving Fox. That, when I went back and I read it, this grabbed my attention, because here's somebody who's trying to think that, and I think it's going to be interesting in hearing his testimony of what the F channel does and how complicit they are, and why, of course, for 2 straight hours, they decided not to take a commercial break. He wrote, "What tugs at my mind after seeing a mob of enthusiastic ignoramuses sack the Capitol, though, is whether that sophistication will come quickly enough when outlets have the means to cater to every unhealthy craving of their consumers." And I thought about that and go, this is what Fox does. They feed them the outrage candy constantly. They give the people what they want, knowing that it's BS, knowing that there was no steal, the election fraud that they were being fed by a president trying to overturn our elections was all total BS. And you had an attorney general, and we saw Billy Barr say that. It's BS. It is what it is. Ivanka, his own daughter, said, yeah, it's kind of BS. Now, of course, the Donald had an explanation for that. Of course he had an explanation for that, and that's, well, she was just trying to be nice. In fact, he went on his social media platform saying Ivanka Trump was not involved in looking at or studying elections results. She had long since checked out and was, in my opinion, this is Trump speaking, only trying to be respectful to Bill Barr and his position as Attorney General. He sucked. This is the former president of the United States writing this on the Truth Social. I wonder how many retruths he got. I don't know what checked out means. I'm not quite sure what that means in his world. But yeah, that's the explanation. I kind of like that though. She's just a little woman. She was over there. She checked out. But if you watched yesterday, if you were one of the 20 million, did you come away with, what I came away with and what others came away with, which is Trump knew from the start. He knew he lost. They all knew. And the Liz Cheney quote that I think was one of the deepest cuts of the entire night, when she said, I say this to my Republican colleagues who are defending the indefensible. There will come a day when Donald Trump is gone, but your dishonor will remain. I mean, and look, I think that was pointed right at my representative, Scott Perry, who was called out as one of the people who sought a pardon, a preemptive pardon from Donald Trump. This has got to be something that has to be addressed. Now, of course, his office says, no. His office, according to Insider, Scott Perry blasted any suggestion that he sought a pardon from President Donald Trump for himself or others, rejecting an eyebrow-raising claim that was made during the January 6th committee first hearing. Perry said, "The notion that I ever sought a presidential pardon for myself or other members is an absolute shameless and soulless lie." Shameless and soulless, something I think he knows a lot about. Somebody got a Bible? Want to shove that in front of him? You want to put his hand on that? Maybe put him under oath next time? You wonder why he didn't honor the subpoena? You wonder why he didn't testify? You wonder why not cooperating? I wonder. But lots of this to get to. Lots came out. I thought they did a very good job of laying out the beginning, the opening salvo, and pointing it where it belonged. It belonged at Trump. All of this comes back to him. He's the one who wound up the toy. He's the one who pointed the toy in that direction, and he's the one who set it off. And at his behest, the useful idiots, or to use Mr. Sturwalt's words, the ignoramuses, they did what he wanted them to do. And as I've said, I think it was a precision attack. I think it was well coordinated, well planned out, and they had trained for it for months. And if you remember at the time, there had been a number of these kind of uprisings at capitals across the country, in Michigan and Ohio and in Virginia, in Richmond, when they had that big Second Amendment lobby day where they showed up with their guns and they had, kind of a mock insurrection there. And I was saying at the time, these are trial runs. They want to see how law enforcement's going to respond. They want to see, how things are going to play out. They want to see how the public's going to respond. We were all trial runs. And look what they got on January 6th. They got a soft police presence that they were able to abuse. And we also saw that in the testimony. Now the hope is that out of this isn't just a rehash of what we saw from different perspective, that actually comes some charges and some accountability, that we actually go after, find the moneyed interests from the top down and hold them accountable. Not just the dupes and the ignoramuses, but the people who plotted, planned, schemed, and funded. Get them all. And for the first time in many of their lives, actually hold them accountable. To me, that's the way we go forward. People like Rudy Giuliani, who we didn't hear his name that I remember yesterday, but today the D.C. bar, they have brought a case against Rudy for him pushing the election fraud accusations in the state of Pennsylvania in a federal court for the Donald. No pardons for Rudy. And this should happen to every one of those lawyers. Every one of them. Just my thoughts. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Did you watch? Did you pay attention? Is it going to matter? That, for me, is the other question in this. Is what we saw going to change hearts and minds, or was this for an audience of one? Was this for Merrick Garland? Was this going to get him to, I don't know, do something? We'll see. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs. in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So not a good month for the inflation numbers in May. In fact, wow, 8.6%, highest number in 4 decades. And boy, the right wing, they're happy as can be, and beaten by no up over. And it's not his fault. I know the right, just thrilled, all tingly in the panties. But this a lot of reasons. What's going on in Russia? Lots of corporate greed. Oh, the corporate greed, and also coming out of the pandemic. All things out of Biden's control, but as I've been saying, may not be his fault, but it is his problem. And this is one of those things where sometimes you're going to have to do things that you're not thrilled with. This one of them. There is a senior U.S. official. It's being reported that they're talking about a reset with Saudi Arabia. Now, Biden ran on some pretty strong language with regard to Saudi Arabia. After all, they're responsible for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi, the Washington Post columnist. Mr. Bonesaw had him chopped up and disposed of. And a lot of people, myself included, not thrilled with the Saudis. 9/11 still bad taste in my mouth. But there's now talk that the U.S. is preparing to move with a reset, to have better relationships because need the oil. So gonna have to go with hat in hand and beg, basically, to say, hey, we need the oil. We need to figure out how to get gas prices down. This is how we're going to help our economy. If you're president, do you do this for the good of the country? Do you swallow your pride and do it, or do you take the hard line and go, no, I'm sticking to my principles, even if it means that the country's going to struggle, that prices are going to remain high, your party's going to take a shellacking in November, and you're going to continue to take a beating. Now, to this point, the reality is, he's stuck to his guns on this. Polling, not great. Now, while the president usually takes a shellacking in the midterms, while the polling numbers usually are pretty poor, Biden's are not great. And as Aaron Blake pointed out in his piece over at the Washington Post, he looked at some polling data. And, every president has their detractors, because every president has people who despise them. The other side has to despise them. And then they have their base. You have their true believers. Biden's true believers are really, really a small number right now. And he pointed out the Marist poll, 40% strongly disapprove, 14% strongly approve. Quinnipiac, 45% strongly disapprove, 15 strongly approve. NBC, 45 strongly disapprove, 16 strongly approve. AP, 39 strongly disapprove, 12 strongly approve. You get the gist. Now that's lower than all of the past presidents of recent memory. Not great. I mean, I guess H.W. Bush's was worse at the end. This not great. And I would argue it's that he hasn't taken, he's tried to be everything and everywhere. He's tried to take in middle ground on stuff and hasn't really come with that forceful agenda. And look, it has everything to do with what you got in the Senate. Here's a guy who wants to try and get something done. And, when you have the mentality of the art of the possible. Hey, we got to get something done. What can get through? Hey, how can I deal with Manchin and Sinema? And, then go down the list, the second tier of the Mark Warners and the Testers and the Kellys and the rest of the moderate Democrats. It kind of waters down what you're able to do. And I look at the student loan stuff. The idea of $10,000 of forgiveness for individuals making less than $150,000 or couples making less than $300,000. That seems to be where the thought is, but that makes everybody angry. The people who wanted debt forgiveness are going, no, it's got to be much more bold. It's got to be much more helpful. What's 10 grand going to help? That's a drop in the bucket for what most people owe. It's got to be bolder. It's got to be bigger. So you're not getting a big base out of that who's, fully enthusiastic, but you are ticking off everybody else on the other side. And this is where I think Biden has to come out and become much more forceful in saying we've got to go for a much more bold agenda. And this was from the beginning. I've been saying this for a while. We needed an FDR. And out of the gate, I thought he was there. You had the recovery plan, the rescue plan. You had the Build Back Better plan, which at the beginning was visionary. Hey, it was bold. We were going to rebuild stuff. We were going to have transformational change. And then corporate America started raising their profits. Inflation started creeping up. And the narrative began to go, well, Biden spending this money gave those working people $1,400. Didn't make those students pay those loans back, and they were able to spend that money on food and clothing instead of student loans. That's what heated up the economy. I literally had someone tell me that. Because there was the eviction moratorium, that we weren't kicking people out of their homes. That's what caused the inflation. And it's ludicrous. What caused this inflation is what's going on in Russia, coming out of the pandemic, massive supply chain backups, and the fact that we're coming out of a damn pandemic with massive corporate profits and CEO pay going through the roof. Talk about that, the study we talked about the other night. The 300 companies that they looked at, the CEO saw a 31% increase in their pay. Did you get 31% increase in yours? No, of course you didn't. This is corporations, this is corporate America going, hey, here's an opportunity to line our pockets. Hey, here's an opportunity to rob, steal, and pillage. Here's an opportunity to cash in. And we can blame Biden. Because, hey, half the country hates him anyway. And, in this poll, 40% of them really hate him. And there isn't that other side really standing up for him. And I blame Democrats for this. But I also blame Biden. Because you got to have something to really stand up for. When we were pushing Build Back Better, even if it was what Manchin was willing to move forward on, we were talking about making change. We were talking about investing in the future. We were talking about getting things done, making lives better, making the country better, moving forward. Now we're stagnant. We're not fighting for something. And this is where, I say it all the time, this is where, white working class voters tend to go to the Republicans because they tend to be the fighters. Now, granted, they're fighting for all the wrong things and they're fighting battles that actually hurt the working class, but the appearance is that they're out there fighting the fight. To me, this is one of those moments. We got to ball up the digits, get in there, mix it up a little bit. Just my thought. Love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. When we come back and talk a little bit more about the January 6th committee's hearing, get some thoughts from inside the Beltway. Right back after this. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1937. That was the day striking steelworkers battled back-to-work forces at Newton Steel in Monroe, Michigan. Steelworkers were on strike against 3 steel companies across 5 states in the push to organize Little Steel. Of the 3, Republic Steel sites had experienced brutal picket line violence, especially in South Chicago. Republic had recently purchased Newton Rolling Mill. Management there was bent on forcing the reopening of the plant. John L. Lewis promised 8,000 to 10,000 workers from Detroit to bolster picket lines. The mayor of Monroe, Daniel Naggs, called upon all able-bodied men with military experience to enlist in a citizens' army to escort scabs back to work. Police and hundreds of deputies set up checkpoints on the outskirts of the city to stop suspected CIO supporters from entering Monroe. Black SWAC organizer Leonidas McDonald from Chicago had already been dragged from his car, beaten, and driven from town on foot by scabs earlier in the day. At the same time, Mayor Naggs, company officials, as well as SWAC and company union organizers met in the state's capital with Governor Murphy to negotiate a settlement. As they met, 200 more special police were sworn in and instructed in the use of sidearms and tear gas. Police deputies and scabs armed with guns, clubs, and tear gas shattered the picket line that evening. Then deputies seized strikers' cars and drove them into the river. 18 strikers were hospitalized. Outraged UAW supporters from Pontiac declared a labor holiday in protest and headed to Monroe. But UAW officials ordered them to turn back in an effort to stem the anti-union violence. The organizing drive had been dealt another serious setback. Rick Smith here, host of The Rick Smith Show. You know, Father's Day is just around the corner. And if your dad is as hard to find a gift for as my wife and kids claim that I am, here's a little gift-giving wisdom from our friends at Omaha Steaks. Dads want steaks. It's true. We do. Every holiday in my house, it's the same thing. Dad, what do you want for this holiday? And, I always give the same thing. Give me a hug and spend a little time with me. I don't need ties or cologne or any of that stuff. And now, thanks to Omaha Steaks, they ask, Dad, what do you want? Steaks. Give me the Dads Want Steaks package. Just go to omahasteaks.com, type Rick Smith in the search bar, and order the Dads Want Steaks package. And for just $99, this limited time package includes 16 mouth-watering entrees that I love, and I guarantee he'll love too. The smoky, tender, bacon-wrapped filet mignons, the gourmet jumbo franks, their air-chilled, boneless chicken breast, and of course my favorite, the thick, delicious, boneless pork chops. And to finish it off, the sweet finish of it all, the delicious caramel apple tartlets. And as a special gift for my listeners, when you type Rick Smith in the search bar and order the Dads Want Steaks package, you'll also get 8 free Omaha Steaks burgers. These are awesome. You throw them on the grill, cook them to perfection. These burgers are full of bold, beefy flavor, made from 100% Omaha steaks, and now they're bigger than ever, a whopping 6 ounces. So this Father's Day, don't wait. Send Dad more than just a gift. Send him an experience he'll love and can share with you. In fact, don't just order one. Get 2 Dads Want Steaks packages. One for him and one he can share with you. Just go to omahasteaks.com and type Rick Smith in the search bar and get the Dads Want Steaks package. You won't regret it. I guarantee it.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I know I say this every time I think of Marjorie Three Names and that Florida guy, Gates. But what horrible human beings. I mean, there's a clip running around on Twitter right now of Marjorie Three Names and Matt Gaetz having a little conversation on her podcast and about the January 6th commission hearing last night and going after Jamie Raskin and saying, well, we can't trust anything he says. That death of his child thing, this is what it's about, revenge on what horrible, horrible people. I mean, Horrible people. And then, oh no, we love people. We're so good. We're so pious. We're so religious. If this weren't FCC dominated radio, I can't tell you the expletives that I'd be using right now. There aren't enough blanks. Not enough blanks. Just my thoughts. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on last night's hearings. And maybe a thought on these horrible people. I've asked Will Roberts to come talk with us. Will is the managing director of of democracy policy at the Center for American Progress, AmericanProgress.org, their website. Will, thanks for taking some time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So let's start off with these two idiots. Who I got to tell you, I cannot believe these two people are anywhere near. I can't believe they let them take the tour of Congress, let alone sit in a seat there. But I'm curious, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, incredibly disgraceful. I agree with you. I heard the comments, unfortunately, about, Rep. Raskin, who many Americans have come to know as a hero, right? A constitutional patriot. Certainly someone who, is a personal hero of mine. He was a former boss. I was Jamie Raskin's legislative director for a number of years, and know Jamie well, know the family well, knew Tommy. And so just disgusting and disgraceful to hear what Gates and Marjorie Taylor Greene had to say, especially given that over the course of what should be, the Raskin family's private time to grieve the loss of their son, Congressman Raskin and Sarah and the whole family have had to channel that into, the effort to save our democracy, and to use that as a punchline to joke about on their podcast and pretend as if they have some kind of empathy is pretty disgusting.
Yeah, I know politics is a rough and tumble thing. I know it's a blood sport. I get that. But is there no decency? I mean, is nothing out of bounds? Maybe
unfortunately not with those two members. Unfortunately not with the as you mentioned, the folks who are not qualified to take the tour of Congress, let alone serve, and their numbers are growing.
No, that's the scary thing. And look, we know what this was. This was the distraction to get us to talk about anything other than what was presented in that hearing, which was damning. I mean, it really was. I mean, they laid out, I think, very succinctly the fact that Trump knew he lost, everybody around him knew he lost, and he was surrounded by cowards who did nothing but went along with the scheme to overthrow our elections. That's what I took from it. Is there anything more that I missed?
No, I think that's completely right. I think what the January 6th committee laid out for us both last night and what they presaged that will come in the successive hearings is the fact that Donald Trump knew that he lost because his election team told him that he lost. He knew that there was nothing there. There was no there, right, to the lies about a stolen election. And even with those facts, he decided to turn his attention to his Twitter fingers and his followers to bring them to D.C. on January the 6th in an effort coordinated with his folks to overturn the election and the will of the people, in an effort to put pressure on Mike Pence to do something he knew that Mike Pence couldn't do, again, to overturn the will of the people and to attack our very democracy.
No, it's just remarkable to me. But the question then becomes, because I sat and I watched the entire thing start to finish. We broadcast the whole thing and had a panel afterwards. The thing that just there were a bunch of things that kept resonating with me, but I kept coming back to, as outraged as I am, and I followed this, from the day it happened all the way through. There wasn't a lot of really new stuff. I mean, there were some new details and some new imagery. Is this going to move the needle? Do you think people were paying attention? Do you get a sense of, is this going to matter?
So, one can only hope. I know that millions of people watched yesterday evening, and, as I said, and as the committee said, they're planning to lay out the story that they are retelling, over several hearings, focusing in on various pieces, right? So the next hearing, I believe, is going to be all about deconstructing or demystifying, what went on to construct the big lie in Trump world, right? There's going to be a piece about some of the connections. I think that what was newsworthy last night and new, perhaps for folks, was seeing things that we had seen on January 6th and afterwards, but in a different way. So both seeing some of the different footage from some of the Capitol Hill security cameras, for instance. What I found interesting and shocking, even reliving the day in my mind, was seeing the convergence of the attack from both sides of the Capitol, right, as the crowd sort of encroached in, but also hearing the details retold from this committee's investigation and the DOJ investigation, for instance, into groups like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers as they brought weaponry, ammo, and guns into the D.C. area, staged them in Virginia, and were awaiting Trump to invoke the Insurrection Act, invoke martial law so that they could come in armed in the streets. I mean, this wasn't just, some spontaneous riot that came, after people took a leisurely stroll down Pennsylvania Avenue. This was a coordinated attack that has the president and his inner circle at the center of it.
Right.
And I think that's the story that they've got to continue to tell to them.
And they've got to hit on that. And what I'd been saying from January 6th on, because I said that night when I went on air, I said, look, that looked like a coordinated attack. And I came on there and I said, look, I've been telling you, it's my belief that all of those, the day they had in Richmond, Virginia, when they had their quote unquote Second Amendment lobbying day where they showed up with their guns, those were training exercises. They were showing their might. They were seeing what the response was going to be. They got no pushback. All of the attacks on our state capitals across the country, those were training exercises for the big dance, which was January 6th. And it looked to me like a precision run military operation to do exactly what they did. And then when you put it against the backdrop of the memos that we didn't know then existed, but now know existed, now it all seems to fit in place.
Yeah, certainly, right? So you have that the insurrection, what people have to understand, is just part of the story, right? January 6th and the attack that happened, was designed to be a part of this process that included, as you said, some of the memos that we've now learned about, plans to have the government seize voting machines, for instance, right? Thoughts about how the president could potentially deploy the military on the streets, all in an effort, again, to seize, to keep power, and to not transfer it peacefully after he knew that he lost the election. And so I think that, you asked at the top sort of what's new and what do I think will come out of this. I hope that, Americans watching of whatever political stripe, and we know certainly that Fox News and others aren't carrying these hearings so that, some of the sort of MAGA set in the Republican Party doesn't want people to see what's happening here. But I'm really hopeful that folks in the mainstream and folks across the spectrum are going to be able to look at what this bipartisan, committee of folks. We got to remember, this is a committee where we're talking about Jamie Raskin and Liz Cheney working together to elevate these facts and protect democracy, right? This is a bipartisan hearing. It's not a joke and certainly isn't partisan. But I'm hoping that Americans see what's going on here, see the facts laid out, and understand more fully sort of what was at play on January 6th, but also what's at play still right now. You mentioned the training exercises with some of the attacks that went on prior to January 6th and demonstrations. We've got training exercises going on right now for the next coup, right? In states and localities where, Trump sort of stop the steal, ultra MAGA people are trying to pack canvassing boards and pack, the levers of power in terms of election offices, which are typically, sort of neutral, if not, nonpartisan, to be able to, again, subvert the will of the people potentially in the next election. And it's a thing we got to be looking out for. Yeah,
we've got a guy in the state where I'm at in Pennsylvania who has already come out and said he's going to steal an election if we let him. Right. And if Pennsylvania is dumb enough to elect Benito Mastriano as governor, well, we've got real problems. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're here with Will Roberts. Will is the managing director of democracy policy at the Center for American Progress. AmericanProgress.org is their website if you want to check out the work that they do. Now, some of the revelations that came out, I was not surprised. but there were a number of Congress people who, according to Liz Cheney, that were begging for pardons. I clearly not surprised that one of them was my congressman, Representative Scott Perry. Now he is claiming that it wasn't him, but what would you expect? I clearly not someone who's going, I was seditious and treasonous, and that was me. I was begging for a pardon. What do you expect? But look, he's eyeball deep into this, like a number of congressional representatives, and those are the people that I want brought out in front. I want them out in front. I want the moneyed interests who funded this, who pushed for this. I want all of them. I'm tired already of the dupes and the useful idiots, the people who urinated on desks and defecated on the floor. They're getting theirs. I want the people who use the useful idiots. I want to get to the top finally. We've done too much of beating up on the people at the bottom. Let's go after the folks who caused all this. At least that's my take on it.
So to your point, one of the other things that we need to see out of this, and that we hope that we do, is real accountability across the board for the folks who planned, orchestrated the attack, and planned and orchestrated the subsequent measures that needed to happen along with the attack to try to subvert the will of the people, try to stop Congress from counting electoral votes. And so, there are a number of members of Congress whom we know from what has come out already, right, who were in contact with some of these groups, these stories that have come out about certain members leading tours around the complex, in the days prior. And so we need all of the facts laid out. I think that's one of the places where this committee is going. You got to remember, they've conducted thousands of hours of depositions and conversations, and if what we saw last night and tape conversations of depositions from Bill Barr and other folks in the Trump inner circle, we're going to hear from more of those as we come out. Well, we have to know all the facts, and we need accountability across the board, including from folks who were and are currently in our government. That cannot be understated. That folks can't be allowed to just sort of go back into cover after having participated in a seditious action against the people of the United States. And I completely agree with you.
No, because at the end of this, the reality is, and I've been saying this all along, they went there with the intent to break the law. The intent from the very beginning was to stop the certification, the legal certification of the electors to certify the president. That was their stated intent. So everything that they did to get to that point seems to me to be criminal. They went there with the express written, stop the steal. They were going to stop it. And the moneyed interest who paid for the buses and the plane tickets and all of this, the money that went to Alex Jones and his group, all of those people need to be exposed and pulled out into the light. And all of the people who were in the background. I mean, why wasn't Jenny Thomas's name brought up last night? And will her name be brought up?
I'm interested to see how that's going to play out. We know certainly, even as recently as today and yesterday, right, stories were breaking that were giving us more information than we knew before about the extent to which in Arizona she was trying to get state legislators to put up a false slate of electors for Donald Trump. So, we certainly heard about and learned about the texts back and forth between her and Meadows. But I think, figures like Jenny Thomas, you mentioned, following the money, there are many concentric circles to this conspiracy and attack, right? And so it is that there was the physical attack on the Capitol, right, led by Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, which sort of guided, sort of were in the crowd. One of the interesting things that I thought the committee pulled out last night in video is showing how the Proud Boys methodically were sort of setting up their positions even before the sort of the ellipse conversation with Trump was over, right? And so they were trying to use that crowd to cause the commotion and the attack. But also there is this larger circle, to your point, that we cannot ignore about who funded this, about who was orchestrating this, right? We need to know more, for instance, about what was happening in that war room at the Willard Hotel with, all of the so-called, Trump brain trust. We need to know unfortunately don't know more about what happened in that meeting that was referenced last night with Michael Flynn and others in the White House with Trump, because there weren't that many other people in the room. But these are the people and the set pieces around this that is really important for Americans to understand, right? Yeah. What people can't come away from is just it's important to come away understanding that this wasn't just a spontaneous riot, but it was an attack. But it's also equally important to understand that it was a vast and widely stretched conspiracy to overthrow the government that's got many hands in it, and we need to know who all those hands belong to.
So you mean it wasn't just any other ordinary day of tourists walking peacefully through the velvet ropes, looking at the statues and the paintings? It wasn't just a peaceful day, a family day in the Capitol?
Absolutely, and despite what Jack Del Rio thinks, it wasn't just a dust-up. It was a coordinated attack on our democracy, and it is really important, that folks get it. And I understand the fatigue that's out there a little bit, where folks are saying, well, we've seen this before. We know what happened on January 6th, but we know what we saw, but we don't know what went into it, what went behind it. And again, it's really important for the committee to lay out all those facts, both just for us to know the truth, but also for DOJ to potentially follow the breadcrumbs for some, important criminal investigations, but also for us to stop it from happening again.
Yeah, that came up last night. This whole thing is for an audience of one, for Merrick Garland to lay out the case of, here it is. We've done your work. Go. Because ultimately, as a guest last night said, ultimately Trump has to be held accountable. I personally don't believe that we're going to hold him accountable. So I'm curious, as a longtime, DC observer, as someone who's worked in the Capitol, as someone who's been around this a long time, do you think it's possible that this rises to the level, given what we saw last night, that he was at the center of all this? He knew, he enraged, he planned, he plotted, he was at the center of every bit of this. He pointed the gun, he pulled the trigger, he did all of this. Is he going to be held responsible?
I would hope so. I despite having worked in Washington for a long time and on the Hill, I still have hope. I really think that this process has to meet the moment of danger that we're in, right? And we are at a moment of maximum danger for our democracy. I don't mean that in a hyperbolic way. Democracy is the exception and not the rule around the world, right? And it is a very fragile thing. And we know are learning more about how close we came to losing it on January 6th. But, to your point, I think the committee is clearly getting past the hurdle of expressing the political will to tell all the facts, right? And so this is already different in many ways than other processes, namely the two impeachments, where former President Trump was attempted to be held accountable. This is a different process altogether. And while ultimately the criminal, referral and the question of what Merrick Garland will do, is certainly housed in DOJ. But I think this committee is going to do everything they can, right, to lay out all the facts, to point in all the directions, to show very clearly, what went down and who was responsible. And I ultimately think that the Department of Justice is going to have enough there, to charge him. And I think that, folks who are, standing on circumstance and hand-wringing about, what it means in a democracy for a former president to be charged with a crime. The former president committed a crime. He should be charged, right? And we already know from that ruling that came out from that federal judge, the potential of federal crimes that former President Trump and others had already committed. And I think we're going to know a lot more by the time these hearings are done.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to see the rest of the presentation. That opening salvo was important. It laid out the beginning of it, but we'll see as this goes on. And I hope you'll come back and share some more thoughts on this as it continues. Will Roberts, I appreciate the time.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. Be happy to come back.
Good stuff. Will Roberts, he is the managing director of democracy policy there at the Center for American Progress. Make sure you check out their website, americanprogress.org. We'll get links out on social media. How you can take a look at that. If you're just joining us, missed any of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Never miss a moment. We'll get links out on social media. You can get that, or just go to your favorite podcast place. It's always there, always available. Quick break, right back. Stick around. focus groups, or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
I hope he's right. I hope by the end of this we have a much clearer picture of all of the criminals and all of the activities. And I'm hoping there's some shiny bracelets being handed out and some orange jumpsuits and some free stays at the Gray Bar Hotel. I think that most certainly something that has to happen, because ultimately there has to be accountability in this. And look, there has to be that kind of a shock moment to where if you're a criminal, if you've broken the law, there has to be something to it, and no reward to it. And I look at what's going on in Michigan right now, where you've got one of the leading Republican gubernatorial candidates, this Ryan Kelly, who was arrested on Thursday, 4 misdemeanor charges tied to January 6th. Entering and remaining in a restricted building, willfully injuring or committing depredation against property of the United States. All misdemeanor charges, but still there. And here's the part that's quite remarkable. And in this moment, not shocking, given what side of the aisle we're talking about. They're actually saying in Michigan, in the Republican Party right now, this is probably going to get him elected. This is his street cred. This is what's going to give him that extra, his little over the top. So maybe he could get elected from jail. I mean, think about that for a second. Looking at what we looked at and rewarding people for. And this is, as I've been saying, this is the problem with waiting as long as the Democrats did to bring out this information. Now, look, I understand they wanted to get everything right. This committee waited too long. And look, I think Liz Cheney, give her the credit that she deserves in this. She could have been another political hack. She's thrown away what could have been a brilliant career. And look, I'm sure she's hoping down the road that she's vindicated. She could have been Speaker of the House. She could have been down the road. But in this moment, she's taking that stand to say, no, democracy is more important. Truth, honesty, honor. That's what's important. And, given the fact that I was not a fan of her father's, the fact that a Cheney is saving or trying to save our democracy, that Dan Quayle is someone who is someone responsible for saving our democracy. Not that, because look, Mike Pence didn't viscerally know that it was wrong. He had to go searching out other opinions. And look, I gave Pence credit. I gave Pence credit for doing the right thing in the right moment. He did. But he had to go ask others. And Dan Quayle being one of them. And I'll be honest, I sadly thought Dan Quayle was dead. I'm glad he's not. I wasn't horribly. You think back to that era. I wasn't horribly opposed to Dan Quayle. Wasn't horribly opposed to George H.W. Bush. Wasn't fond of his policies. But wasn't a fan. How did we get to a point to where we identify ourselves by who we voted for in the last election and whose T-shirt we bought? We, the working class of this country, had better come around to some pretty quick ideals and start pushing for some policies that are going to make our lives better, because this is where we put ourselves. We better figure this out, and we better do it quick, because we're literally being ripped apart. While the Chinese are getting stronger, while the rest of the world is moving forward, we're literally ripping ourselves apart. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of the program, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available, wherever you get your favorites.
ExxonMobil. The stock is now up more than 68% this year.
Great news for big oil. U.S. gas prices and profits to remain high all summer. Snow-covered Swiss Alps are losing their snow. Plus, Biden proposes a new marine monument while Interior moves to end single-use plastic in national parks.
All of those proposals and more straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
Let me get this straight. North Korea and South Korea and the United States are now launching missile after missile into the ocean. But I'm not allowed to use plastic straws? Huh? Is that right?
This is your Green News Report.
Yeah, I saved the turtle, the one that got shot by a ballistic missile.
Okay, Desi Doyen, the war profiteering continues, and they continue to call it inflation.
Yes, they do. Gas prices are about 50% higher than a year ago and will remain high until at least autumn. That's according to new projections by the Federal Energy Information Administration. And that is great news for big oil. ExxonMobil stock this week jumped to its highest level since 2014. But new data indicates that the high cost of gas appears to be beginning to undercut demand in the U.S. ahead of the summer driving season. In a hearing this week, Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen debunked Senate Republicans' false attacks on President Biden's energy policies. She noted that oil companies are not increasing production despite the high prices and despite sitting on thousands of unused leases on the public's lands ready to drill.
They are just raising prices. Their profits are at an all-time high. This is not because the cost of oil has gone up.
Yellen said that because oil is a volatile commodity traded on global markets, accelerating the transition away from fossil fuels would do much more to protect American consumers.
Yes, it would.
Given the global nature of these markets, it's virtually impossible for us to insulate ourselves from shocks like the ones that are occurring in Russia that move global oil prices. And look, over the medium term, the critical thing is that we become more dependent on the wind and the sun.
Or you could just nationalize the oil companies. Just saying.
Meanwhile, big oil and gas companies are underreporting leaks of methane from their existing drilling operations. According to a new report by the House Science Committee, oil and gas drillers have internal data showing that their methane emissions in the Texas Permian Basin, quote, are likely significantly higher than official data reported to the Environmental Protection Agency.
Shocking.
The report calls for tougher surveillance measures to force drillers to do more to control potent climate-warming methane leaks that cause dangerous man-made climate change.
Yeah, but that would just cost the money, cut into their record profits.
In Europe, a new study confirms that the European Alps are greening as the region warms due to man-made climate change. Satellite data show that the famous snow-covered Alps are gradually turning from white to green. The new research finds that 77% of the Alps above the tree line have experienced a greening over the last 40 years, with plants now growing at higher elevations than before, where previously they would not have survived. Here in the U.S., it's not much better. Federal scientists project in a new study that Colorado will lose half of its snow by 2080 and look more like Arizona. Parts of Colorado, Wyoming, and Utah are drying out due to climate-driven changes in stream flows, shifting those states into more arid conditions like the Southwest. Colorado won't turn into a desert, the researchers say, but it will be hotter, drier, and a lot less skiable in just a few decades.
I've got a solution.
What's that?
Get rid of the federal scientists.
But some good news. In a major step to reduce plastic pollution in our national parks, Interior Secretary Deb Haaland this week signed a new order directing the department to reduce the purchase, sale, and distribution of single-use plastic products and packaging on federal properties and to find alternatives that are biodegradable or compostable, with a goal of phasing out single-use plastics entirely by 2032. And finally, in honor of World Oceans Day on Wednesday, President Biden announced a number of ocean conservation efforts, including proposing a new undersea marine sanctuary in the Hudson Canyon, an underwater canyon about 100 miles from New York City that rivals the Grand Canyon in size. The proposed monument is part of the Biden administration's broad plan to safeguard 30% of U.S. lands and waters by 2030 and the wildlife that lives there, preserving critical habitat threatened by development and global warming.
We'll take whatever we can get at this point. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So as I said earlier, one of the things that I'm frustrated with the Biden administration is, they haven't taken what I would argue are really solid positions. And this student loan thing is one of those. I think, this $10,000 is kind of the weakest position of all. I mean, if you're going to do it, do it. If not, then just say, hey, we couldn't get anything done. But 10 doesn't seem to be a lot. And as I've talked about, I have a young relative who recently, shared with me that in her 4 years to get her bachelor's degree, ran up $100,000 in student loan debt, with numerous loans, some of them as high as 11% interest. Now, this would be outside of anything Biden could do. These are really predatory private loans, and all of this should be criminal in my view. But what we've done to this generation, oh my goodness. And the amount of money that has gone into the privateers and the profiteers' pockets should be criminal, and it's something that has to be addressed. Now, as I've said, I'm against complete debt forgiveness. There's got to be a fairness way. So forgiveness, amnesty, whatever word you want to use, not sure I'm there. Fairness, justice, that's what we've got to do. I'm here to share some thoughts on maybe how we get there. I've asked Alan College to come talk with us. Alan is the founder of the Student Loan Justice Group. StudentLoanJustice.org is their website. They're pushing the idea of canceling student loans and doing something on the justice front. Alan, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, it's great to be with you, Rick.
So you caught my attention on Facebook because you put out a bunch of people's information. You put out how much money they borrowed, how much money they've paid back, and how much money they still owe. And I'll just give you an example. You put out Robert's name from New York. He borrowed just over $20,000. He repaid almost $40,000, and somehow, and I don't know how this is possible, maybe you can explain it, still owes $168,000. How is that possible?
Yeah, these loans, Rick, are weaponized against the citizens. Unlike every other loan in the country, student loans are uniquely stripped of the bankruptcy protections that the founding fathers called for in the Constitution, believe it or not. Doesn't exist uniquely for student loans. Also, statutes of limitations have been removed from federal student loans. And truth in lending, also fair debt collection practices, these have all either been reduced or removed from student loans. But those first two is really the 1-2 punch. So when people get into default on their loans, the penalty and collection, the fee regime that gets slapped onto these loans is just ridiculous. And so, yeah, we see $20,000 loans turn into $100,000 plus obligations all the time. And, many people pay and pay and pay and pay through the nose, like those a couple examples there.
No,
But
some of the examples you put forward, I mean, Janelle, I guess her name is, from Oregon, borrowed $44,000, repaid $50,000, still owes $142,000. You go, there's no fairness here. And my solution to this problem is I don't want to get into intergenerational jealousy, which I think debt forgiveness would do, and we can talk about that in a minute. I think there's got to be some bit of fairness. You borrowed $20,000, you borrowed $44,000, you got to pay that back. But all of maybe a little bit of interest to cover the cost of servicing the loans, but all of these fees, all of this predatory stuff, that stuff's got to be dealt with and done away with. We've got to do something much like during the FDR years with the Home Ownership Loan Corporation, something that provides some fairness. You borrowed some money, you paid it back. We're done. We fixed the system going forward so we don't screw another generation like we've done this last one.
Well, the fundamental cornerstone of fairness, Rick, and nobody wants to file, but it's bankruptcy. The founding fathers called for uniform bankruptcy laws in the Constitution, ahead of the power to frickin' declare war and raise an army. And the removal of this lies at the heart of this predatory, hyperinflationary, I call it a lending scam, and it really is a scam. So I agree with you. A simple floor of fairness is required, and I think that starts by returning the bankruptcy protections, which should have never been taken away. By the way, Dick Durbin has a really good bill out right now, S2598, that will return bankruptcy to federal student loans with a 10-year waiting period. So it's not perfect. It's not full reinstatement, but it's limited, but it's still pretty good. Also requires the colleges to reimburse the federal government up to, it's a nominal amount, half the amount that was originally borrowed. So in the case of Robert, that would be, $10,000. So it's a sliding scale. So it's not a huge amount for the colleges, but it's something.
So let me ask you about this plan, because what's coming out of the administration right now is Biden's looking at $10,000 in debt forgiveness somehow. Is that going to be helpful? Is it at all helpful?
No, it's a joke. People who have less than $10,000 in student loans, they don't need the relief and they won't appreciate it, and it's kind of stupid. The people who have been hurt the worst, and this gets back to your earlier point about intergenerational, something few people realize: there are more people older people outnumber younger people with student loans here today. More people over 35 than under 35 with student loans. People over the age of 50, believe it or not, outnumber the people under the age of 25 with student loan debt. And I can tell you, Rick, it is the older crowd, the over, say, 45, 50 crowd, who have seen their numbers just go bonkers, like those two examples that you mentioned. So, yeah, I mean, it's $10,000 is nothing, and the sort of upper limit that we're seeing is this so-called up to $50,000 proposal from Senator Elizabeth Warren. But I'm telling you, Rick, I've been watching this lending system for many, many years, and I can tell you that when they say up to $50,000, it's almost meaningless, because those are lawyer words. And after means testing, and they'll bureaucratize it to death, it'll come to mean almost nothing for almost everyone. So, I keep coming back to bankruptcy. The bankruptcy laws have been strengthened significantly to preclude, fraud and abuse and that sort of thing. Ultimately, however, I think the president has to broadly cancel loans at this point. The numbers are just too cartoonish. The state of Texas, for example, $141 billion in mostly federal student loan debt hanging around the necks of mostly Republicans and independents in Texas. What would happen if we took $141 billion out of Texas and sent that money mostly to Washington, D.C.? It's just not going to happen. The lending system is failed. I think it needs to be replaced.
Yeah, and I look at one of the other examples, the one that just blew my mind. Wendy from Washington, you said borrowed $127,000, has repaid $270,000. She's already repaid more than double what she took out, and still somehow miraculously owes $401,000. I have no idea how you get those numbers, how that $401,000 on a $127,000 loan when you've paid $270,000. I don't know how that math, look, I'm not the brightest bulb in the box, but I don't know how that math happens, even in the most predatory of systems.
It is predatory Washington accounting magic, So let's take the case of Robert. I'm just guessing. I don't know his details, but you take a $20,000 loan out, you pay for a while, maybe you run into default at some point. Well, with penalties and fees, that $20,000 very quickly becomes $30,000, $40,000. A couple of years with interest, all of a sudden it's a $50,000 note. Well, what a lot of people do is rehabilitate their loans, and it's a very loaded term. But what they do is they pay and pay for 10 months. The loan gets taken out of default and recycled as a brand new undefaulted loan. But they attach huge penalty, origination fees and startup fees, new fees tacked on. So that $20,000 defaulted loan pretty soon is a $50,000, $60,000 new loan. And most of the time, like literally 80% of the time, these quote unquote rehabilitated loans will default again. And so that everything that I just said happens again, only now the basis is, $60,000 or $70,000. So you can see how a $20,000 loan very quickly becomes, $150,000+ monstrosity.
So let me ask you this, Alan, because, I think back to when I was in college back in the 80s, and a lot of people my age, we took out student loans, and I know a lot of people, I paid mine off, didn't have the kind of numbers they have now. I remember I didn't, when I was in school, you didn't pay interest until you started work 6 months after you started working. And then you had the ability to put them on hold if you lost your job and were unemployed for a period of time. There was some rules there that helped to buffer things. I don't remember this stuff happening at this rate. Is this the same system? Did things change? Because I want people my age to understand that things aren't. This isn't apples and apples.
No, it's not at all. These are not your father's student loans at all. Back in the 80s, early 90s, these loans had bankruptcy rights. They had statutes of limitations. The just vicious, snake-like profit motive was really not there. But, they took statutes of limitations away in 1992. They made bankruptcy permanently unavailable for all federal student loans in 1998. They essentially gave the lending industry a license to steal. And remember, it's not the government running this program back in the 90s, early 2000s. It's private banks like Sallie Mae and Nelnet and others who, like any other corporation, they're trying to please their shareholders.
Right. That's what I was going to ask you, because I want to make sure that we're talking about the right stuff, because Biden's talking about federal loans. And I look at my young relative who the vast majority of her loans are private loans, not the federal ones. And even if Biden does forgive all federal loans, it's not going to help her one lick. So what we're talking about are the federal loans. We're not even talking about all those people who got snookered with these private loans, are we?
No, and that's right. The president can only cancel federally owned student loans. So privately owned student loans are not cancelable by executive order. And also remember, Rick, private loans, and this is the biggest coup, and I'm sorry to say President Biden deserves quite a bit of credit here. Private loans were also stripped of bankruptcy protections in 2005. So these private student loans are particularly vicious.
This whole system is vicious because, look, the reality is we have screwed this generation and the one before it by massively increasing tuitions, massively increasing the amount that students have to pay. Here where I'm at in Pennsylvania, I've talked to a past union president here that represents the faculty, and he said, back when my generation went to school here, we picked up about a third of the cost of the tuition. Taxpayers and state and local government picked up about 2/3. Now that number is the students are picking up 3/4 of the cost, and the state and local governments are picking up about 1/4. They've completely flipped it up on top of its head and saddled because we need skin in the game, Alan. Saddled the student with all this debt, and then said, hey. Here are these wonderful loans. So we've screwed a generation. So one, we've got to fix something with the debt, but also going forward, we got to fix the system that's saddling them with these loans and charging them so much for education, because we need an educated workforce.
I couldn't agree with you more, Rick. Quite frankly, this current lending system, I think it's toast. I think it's done. I think the pandemic was the nail in the coffin. Even before the pandemic, more than half of all borrowers were not making payments. That's before the pandemic. Today, almost nobody's paying. And I'm sorry, but whenever they try and turn these loans back on, I'd be stunned if even a quarter of the borrowers.
Is that the answer? I mean, is that right there the answer? Everyone just goes, to heck with it. We're not paying it.
Well, it's finished. It needs to be replaced. I think that we can figure out a way to fund colleges and educate our citizens without indebting them for life and without making, 5-star hotels out of all the college campuses. Quite frankly, the colleges have made just a tremendous amount of wealth out of this that they probably didn't so much need. I think that we can do the job for a lot cheaper, and what that looks like remains to be seen. I'm sort of agnostic on that. But I do know if there is going to be a student loan system going forward, it has got to have all the same consumer protections that every other loan has.
There you go. So last line of questioning I've got for you, the marching orders coming out of this, because, I know a lot of people who are saying, we got to solve this problem, not just for the people who are affected by it now, but for future generations. So, as founder of the Student Loan Justice Group, studentloanjustice.org, what's the advice for parents? What's the advice for people who are struggling under this? What are the marching orders?
It's the Wild West out there for people already who've been hurt by these loans. Nobody knows what's going to happen. I can tell them that it doesn't happen in a vacuum, and people out there being wrecked, like those examples, they need to be fighting for themselves. I urge them strongly when it comes to student loan justice and, help us out with our daily actions and so forth. To prospective students and their parents, I think they need to be arguing strongly and pushing their members of Congress to come up with a fair, equitable, reasonably priced way to educate our citizens. And I try not to pin myself down beyond that, but certainly some radical changes are needed. And what we've seen from President Biden are not that. He's not winning any voters.
Yeah.
He's right now he's blatantly betraying things that he said during the campaign.
Yeah, I got an idea. We've got a lot of corporations right now that are making record profits. We got billionaires who are doing really well. We got a tax code that created all of them by stealing from the working class and taking our educational opportunities away from students. Maybe that's a place to start, where we grab some of that wealth back and redistribute it back to the working class of this country. Just kind of a thought.
I couldn't agree with, wealth inequality is at never before seen levels, even including like 1929, I think we're like right there. There's got to be a way to make that all even out.
Right there with you. Alan, I appreciate the time. Always good. It's good talking with you. I hope you'll come back and share some thoughts as this moves down the road. It's not going away anytime soon. Keep up the great work.
Sounds good, Rick. Nice. Good talking to you.
Good stuff, Alan Collins. Make sure you check out their website. We'll get links out on social media, how you can take a look at that. Studentloanjustice.org, the website. Make sure you take a look at it. And look, seriously, some of these numbers just mind-blowing. I mean, the ones with this Wendy from Washington, I saw that, and that's what stopped me. She took out $127,000 in loans, repaid $270,000 she paid back, and somehow miraculously owes $401,000. I don't know. I would love to see the paperwork on that. I would love to see how that is justified in any way, shape, or form. If anyone can explain it to me, please, I need to see I want to see it in writing. I want to see how anyone can justify that. Just insane. Anyway, if you got any thoughts, if you can justify it, email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I got to know. Also, if you're just joining us, make sure you grab the podcast. Quick break, right back. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
I got to tell you, that's just such a screw job. It's such a ripoff. And it goes back to, whenever we profitize anything, we get the short end of the stick. Because, look, we were told, give this off to private corporations. They're going to do a better job. It's going to be better. It's going to be better. It's going to be better. It's like anything. When we privatized our turnpikes, it's going to be better. Ask Indiana if it's any better. Privatized our parking authorities. Hey, Chicago, how you liking that privatized parking authority you got? Because, I got a friend who's basically written the book on this. And he just put out a new piece on this. That back in 2008, when Chicago privatized their parking authority, their parking meters, there's just a new study out that said that Chicago evidently just lost another $136 million in revenue, and I guess they sold off the parking meters for $1.15 billion to private investors from like Dubai, and they now control something like 36,000 parking meters in Chicago for like 75 years. And almost immediately they figured out, oops, we kind of screwed that up. Oops, 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 it was worth an awful lot more than the 1.15 billion. In fact, the city's inspector general concluded that it was actually $1 billion less than they were actually worth. So they got screwed out of like half. And what this report has pointed out that since the sale, profits, the investors made their money back, the $1.15 billion from 2008 to 2019. They made all of their $1.15 billion back, plus another $500 million. So that's 11 years. 11 years. They got all their money back plus another $500 million. And they still have, another 64 years pure profit. And they've jacked up the costs. This is what privatization schemes get us. And why I'm always dead set against selling off the commons, selling off our parking, our water, our sewers, our roads, our bridges. And if you go back to the Trump years, how we were going to fund infrastructure, we were going to sell it all off. We were going to hand it off to private interests. We're going to use tax. Their idea of a public-private partnership is to use public money to privatize our infrastructure. It's what they do. And it's angering, it's frustrating. But again, it's sadly what goes on. It's frustrating. It just is. I got like 30 seconds. Who we got? Peter, what's on your mind, Peter? You got 30 seconds.
Hey, Peter, you were just talking about the value of money.
Yeah. Huh? Okay. I was talking about the value of money. No, I was talking about the value of the parking meters in Chicago and how, the city of Chicago got screwed over, and I think the taxpayers got screwed over as well. Sorry, Peter, right up against the break here. But these privatization schemes always seem to end up badly for us. And understand, I don't think that they'd be doing them. I don't think they'd be doing them if it didn't work out well for them. And this is why we need better. We need better politicians fighting for better policies and demanding that we stop getting the short end of the stick. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1946. That was the day that the U.S. Supreme Court handed down a decision that would have massive implications for American workers. The case was known as Anderson v. Mount Clemens Pottery. The pottery company was operated on a large 8-acre property in Mount Clemens, Michigan. Each day, the workers punched into their shifts and then had to make their way to their workstations. There, they had to get ready to work, perhaps donning gloves, sharpening tools, or readying their workstations. The company estimated that these tasks took 14 minutes. So, they subtracted 14 minutes from the workers' timesheets each day. 7 workers had had enough and decided to sue the company with backing from their union. They argued that they should be compensated for their entire time, including the time it took to prepare for work. The Supreme Court agreed with the workers. Justice Frank Murphy wrote the decision for the court. He himself was from Michigan and had previously been the mayor of Detroit and the governor of the state. Unfortunately, the Supreme Court case was not the last word on the matter. In 1994, the State Bar of Michigan and the Macomb County Bar Association helped erect a historic marker commemorating this important case. It described what happened after Justice Murphy's determination. Quote, the following year, Congress, responding to the Mount Clemens Pottery decision, enacted the Portal to Portal Act to relieve employers of the obligation to pay for time spent in non-productive activities, except where such activities are compensable through custom or contract, notably through collective bargaining. In other words, Congress passed a law undermining the court's protection of workers. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. Rick Smith here, host of The Rick Smith Show. You know, Father's Day is just around the corner. And if your dad is as hard to find a gift for as my wife and kids claim that I am, here's a little gift-giving wisdom from our friends at Omaha Steaks. Dads want steaks. It's true. We do. Every holiday in my house, it's the same thing. Dad, what do you want for this holiday? And, I always give the same thing. Give me a hug and spend a little time with me. I don't need ties or cologne or any of that stuff. And now, thanks to Omaha Steaks, they ask, Dad, what do you want? Steaks. Give me the Dads Want Steaks package. Just go to omahasteaks.com, type Rick Smith in the search bar, and order the Dads Want Steaks package. And for just $99, this limited time package includes 16 mouth-watering entrees that I love, and I guarantee he'll love too. The smoky, tender, bacon-wrapped filet mignons, the gourmet jumbo franks, their air-chilled, boneless chicken breast, and of course my favorite, the thick, delicious, boneless pork chops. And to finish it off, the sweet finish of it all, the delicious caramel apple tartlets. And as a special gift for my listeners, when you type Rick Smith in the search bar and order the Dads Want Steaks package, you'll also get 8 free Omaha Steaks burgers. These are awesome. You throw them on the grill, cook them to perfection. These burgers are full of bold, beefy flavor, made from 100% Omaha steaks, and now they're bigger than ever, a whopping 6 ounces. So this Father's Day, don't wait. Send Dad more than just a gift. Send him an experience he'll love and can share with you. In fact, don't just order one. Get 2 Dads Want Steaks packages. One for him and one he can share with you. Just go to omahasteaks.com and type Rick Smith in the search bar and get the Dads Want Steaks package. You won't regret it. I guarantee it.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So, back in the middle of April, you may remember the United States Football League kicked off, and I was really excited. Spring football, I love football, football year-round. Excellent opportunity for players to practice their craft. Look, I would have loved to have played longer than I was able to. Bum knees, bad. But I love the game. I love watching the game, love playing. So when there's an opportunity for people to continue to play and to get paid for it, even better. But at the time, one of the things I said is, hey, if we're going to have a league and you're going to have owners and you're going to have, Fox owning the whole thing and there's going to be profit to be made, we got to watch out for the players. And I would love to see them unionize. I'd love to see them have some rights, a seat at the bargaining table to share in the profits of their labor so that they get decent wages, hours, conditions, all the things that we working people should be demanding. And on Monday of this week, well, they did just that. Under the heading of the United Football Players Association, they voted to unionize, and that's why I've asked their president, Kenneth Farrow, to come talk with us. Kenneth is the president of the United Football Players Association, their website, unitedplayers.org. Kenneth, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on today.
So let's start with the congratulations. Great work. This is quick. I got to tell you, I was surprised at the speed at which this happened.
Yeah, it's the football world is small. Everybody knows each other. It's a very tight-knit community, so I think that definitely worked to our advantage. And myself having just played a couple of years ago and not being removed at all from the game, having teammates out there on the field right now on some of the teams, I think it was just the communication was there, and I think that's key to anything when you're trying to accomplish something like this.
Throughout my lifetime, I remember back when I was in high school, there was the strike that most of the season was lost, and I remember the Cleveland Browns came to our stadium and practiced and all this, and I remember those guys being some of the strongest, most staunch union members that I've ever met. Steelworkers, Teamsters. I've been a Teamster for over 30 years, but those football players were some of the strongest union members that I've ever known. Because look, this is their craft, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we've gone through a lot of years to be able to get to a professional stage. And I think, for these spring leagues to come up, I think it needs to be done professionally. And I think that's something that, players can kind of bring to the table and voice an opinion on what does it look like to be a professionally ran league. You got guys that have played in the NFL. You got guys that are part of the NFLPA in these leagues. And by circumstance or situation, they find themselves in some of these leagues, whether it's injury or whatever the case may be. And so being able to kind of raise the standard, raise the bar of, what a professional league looks like and how it operates and things like that. I think that's something us as players can definitely bring to the table and help with the entirety of what goes out on Saturdays and Sundays.
And also to share in the wealth that your labor creates. And ultimately, this is about, doing what you love, because, clearly football is something that you got to love to play it, but also being able to support yourself, your family, and your future. Because at the end of this, like a lot of us who have played even at high school and, college levels, you're going to walk away with some problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's, when you talk about the health and safety and things like that, that's number one. I had a teammate in the XFL before it got shut down, one of the last games, fracture his neck and had to go, through all sorts of stuff to try and get PT and things like that. And, there's, always situations that you hear about guys having to, kind of take it up on their own to, rehabilitate themselves to get them back to a place where they can play. And every time that they have to do that, that injury is on the watch of the employer. And so being able to make sure that there's things like that in place to protect guys and just, and it's a long process. You go through an injury, it's not just the injury, it's getting back to where you were before that. And so making sure that we have those things in place and protections in place. And like you said, obviously seeing where all the profits are going and being able to collectively get to the table and be a partner in the business.
And it's not just about getting back to playing and being able to get back into the game. It's about, crawling around the floor with your kids, being able to take a walk in the park. It's about getting back to some semblance of life. And I think a lot of people, they see some of the eye-popping salaries and they don't understand what all goes into it. Because look, I think the Players Association has done such a good job of ensuring that players get a share of the wealth that their labor creates. And I think there's I think there's a lesson that should be learned in all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing, when you look across the spring leagues and some of the attempts before, the model is there for the most part from the NFL. They've been able to do it and do it for a long time. And so to be able to kind of, lean on the expertise of some of the player reps or, some of the guys that have been involved in that, obviously we're dealing on a whole different scale of money when we're talking about these spring leagues. So I think everybody's really mindful of that. As players, we understand that this isn't the billion-dollar industry or entity that the NFL is. But in that same breath, there's a lot of things that have gone under the table the last couple of years for lack of having a voice, and players didn't know about it. And you kind of find out after the fact, and it's like, well, dang, what was I, I'm signing cards and not seeing anything from it, or jerseys are going up and I'm not seeing a dime, or things like that. And it's, like you said, a part of what builds the wealth. A major part is the players and everything that, they bring to the table. So just being able to get in on those conversations and see, what's right. I think with our position right now specifically, we're definitely making sure that we keep in mind that, these leagues are starting up and this is the first league. And I think more than anything, we want these leagues to be around and sustain themselves. That way guys continue to have jobs. But at the same point, there's no reason for us not to be at the table and collectively be able to do that together.
No, absolutely. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show with Kenneth Farrow. He's president of the United Football Players Association. If you want to check out more of the work that they're doing, unitedplayers.org is the website. Make sure you check that out. We'll get links out on social media. So now you've won the election. That happened on June the 6th. Now the work begins, I guess, right? Hammering out a contract, getting to the nuts and bolts, getting to the table. Because the season just about over, I guess, there are 2 weeks left. Right. This is the build for next year. I guess the teams will be going back to their own facilities next year, not just playing all the games in Birmingham as they did this year. Maybe some expansion, maybe some stuff like that. Thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a lot in the air. As of right now, there's not truly facilities. These spring leagues kind of start up and the bubble city is kind of houses everybody. And so to kind of see what the next year looks like, whether it's branching out into 2 bubble cities or trying to get some cities to their respective areas, it'll be interesting to see. And so like you said, it is the end of the season, so now we're just looking towards being able to have our player reps elected from each team, and that way we can all collectively meet and start to talk about ideas and thoughts as players of how the first season went, what things could be done to improve. And then we'll move into the off season, kind of putting those things on paper and figuring out, what steps that we're going to take moving forward.
So I'm curious. I know it's been a very short period of time since the election going forward. And I'm sure you've had some meetings with the owners and all of this. Do you see this as potentially as a partnership with the owners in the union, or do you see this as something being adversarial going forward? Because this has got to be, if viewed as a partnership, an incredible opportunity to build from the ground up and be partners in building something pretty terrific.
Absolutely. From the very beginning of this thing, none of us as players, we had to go through bankruptcy 101 and medical bills and collections calling us for medical things that we were having done. And it's like, you start to realize that even with all those things being said, the need and the want to go out there and still play the game is always going to be there, right? It doesn't matter, what guys have kind of gone through in the past. It's like, we want to be able to be a part of something that's done professionally. And I think, for the most part, that's everybody's goal. So there is no, adversarial attitude moving into this thing. This is truly, you have owners that have not necessarily been football people. And to be able to bring something to the table from a collective voice of guys who have been in the football world their entire lives, I think this is something that we can both build. And like you said, from being able to be a part of this and being able to have the opportunity to be at the table at the groundworks of these leagues popping up, I think is something pretty special for us as players. I don't know if there's ever been a league start up and right away they were able to get to the table and talk about, how this thing is going to grow and build out. And so we're optimistic that this is a healthy partnership and a very transparent one, and things are able to get relayed and things are able to get fixed, or, like I said, the main goal is to be able to grow this thing and have us at the table while it grows. and not be ignored or looked off to the side. I think we're a big part of it. So.
No, that's what I want to hear. Because look, I want to love the league. I want to be a big supporter, and I want to know that the people who are making this league what it is, and making it profitable and making it exciting. I want to make sure that they're taken care of. Because you go back to when I was a kid, and you think of some of those great names of the past, and you think about I think of Johnny Unitas, who almost died penniless. I mean, the horror stories that we've heard from the past. You don't want replicated in the future. So the fact that, now you have an opportunity to make sure that people who are going to be able to follow their passions, but also make sure that their futures are going to be okay going forward. I think that's important.
Yeah, absolutely. The game takes a toll on guys physically, mentally. There's been so much coming out, surrounding the brain injuries and things like that. And so this is not, this isn't just your everyday path of employment. Guys are out there putting their entire bodies on the line, and I think it's super important for us to have a voice in the protections of that. And I think it's been like I said earlier, it's been a learning process to learn about the situations that happen outside of the football world in similar industries, whether it be factories or warehouses and things like that. And you start to really see that this is something that's needed everywhere. You know what I mean? There's no reason why the people who, make the companies go should not have a healthy partnership in how it goes. So,
No, I say that about every working person. You should have a union. You should have a voice. You should have the ability to sit down across from your employer and hammer out the best agreement that the both of you can get. Fight for better wages, hours, and especially in your position, working conditions. Safe working conditions are paramount, especially there. Let me ask you a last line of questioning, because you're a steel worker now, I guess. I know you're with it's the United Football Players Association, but you're partnered up with the Steelworkers Union. How'd that come about?
Just, like I said before, the football world is very small. Everybody knows everybody. And from that, there's so many connections that guys have been able to make off the field, and just great relationships that have been built. And so we were just able to get into the conversation through one of our advisors through the Players Association, a professor at Rutgers, labor law professor at Rutgers that had some ties into the steel workers, and he set up a Zoom call, and the rest was history. They kind of heard our story, and they understood it, and they viewed it as important enough to take action with us now. And I think that was the biggest thing. I think, a lot of these spring leagues that pop up, people really don't pay too much attention to because they think it's going to be here and there. And I think the steel workers kind of standing on what they stand on, they saw the need for it, and they and we were able to create a partnership that, I think is not, none of this is possible without that partnership right now. And so we're extremely grateful. I'm extremely grateful to be able to be a part of this. And I think it's the start of something really big, because you look across the sports world, and I think this is a similar situations for almost every sport at this level. There's a ton of people who are out there in different sports that don't have that collective voice, but are going through leagues year to year and just kind of dealing with what they deal with.
Well, hopefully this is the model, because, as I'm thinking this through, and as I was thinking about it this afternoon before we had a chance to talk, and I'm going, this could be the model for all of these upstart leagues, where, sure, you're going to try something new, but you're also going to have some buy-in from the players so that they profit from it as well, and they're not the ones who are being exploited, because that's always my concern in these things, that, you get somebody who goes, hey, I got a scheme, and that scheme usually ends up being the folks who are doing the work, getting the screw jobs. So I'm glad to hear. I'm thrilled with this. I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys come up with, and making sure that this goes forward.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Absolutely. I appreciate you.
I hope you'll come back and share some more as this continues. And anytime you got something to talk about, we want to have you back. I appreciate it, Kenneth.
Yes, sir. Will do. I appreciate it.
Great stuff. Kenneth Farrow. He is the president there of the United Football Players Association. Make sure you check out their website, unitedplayers.org. We'll get links out on social media how you can do that. I got to tell you, I think it's fabulous. Love to hear your thoughts. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. Rick Smith here, host of The Rick Smith Show. You know, Father's Day is just around the corner. And if your dad is as hard to find a gift for as my wife and kids claim that I am, here's a little gift-giving wisdom from our friends at Omaha Steaks. Dads want steaks. It's true. We do. Every holiday in my house, it's the same thing. Dad, what do you want for this holiday? And, I always give the same thing. Give me a hug and spend a little time with me. I don't need ties or cologne or any of that stuff. And now, thanks to Omaha Steaks, they ask, Dad, what do you want? Steaks. Give me the Dads Want Steaks package. Just go to omahasteaks.com, type Rick Smith in the search bar, and order the Dads Want Steaks package. And for just $99, this limited time package includes 16 mouth-watering entrees that I love, and I guarantee he'll love too. The smoky, tender, bacon-wrapped filet mignons, the gourmet jumbo franks, their air-chilled, boneless chicken breast, and of course my favorite, the thick, delicious, boneless pork chops. And to finish it off, the sweet finish of it all, the delicious caramel apple tartlets. And as a special gift for my listeners, when you type Rick Smith in the search bar and order the Dads Want Steaks package, you'll also get 8 free Omaha Steaks burgers. These are awesome. You throw them on the grill, cook them to perfection. These burgers are full of bold, beefy flavor, made from 100% Omaha steaks, and now they're bigger than ever, a whopping 6 ounces. So this Father's Day, don't wait. Send Dad more than just a gift. Send him an experience he'll love and can share with you. In fact, don't just order one. Get 2 Dads Want Steaks packages. One for him and one he can share with you. Just go to omahasteaks.com and type Rick Smith in the search bar and get the Dads Want Steaks package. You won't regret it. I guarantee it. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. That's really great news. I'm thrilled to hear that the players of the USFL have voted to organize in this first season. Because understand, they're all in this one little bubble down in Birmingham, Alabama. All 8 teams. If you're not seeing it on TV, I love going to games. I can't wait for them to break out. Because we'll be traveling to one of the games or a couple of them. It'd be good to see that expansion. I remember the old USFL, and I was thinking about this afternoon. An old friend was, back when Trump was running for president, talking about just how inept Trump was. He was part owner of the New Jersey Generals at the time. And this friend of mine, Doug Allen, he was one of the attorneys. He was working with the Players Association, negotiating the contract for the players back then. And he tells the story of how Trump came in and basically blew up the negotiations. Just came in and screwed everything up, and how all the other owners hated him because he came in, made it all about him, and ended up screwing it up so badly, giving away so much to the players. The Players Association loved him because he was so bad at it. Mr. Art of the Deal was Mr. Art of the Bad Deal. And all you had to do, and this is what Doug said, all you had to do was stoke his ego. You're wonderful, you're terrific, you're fabulous. And that was the way forward there. Some people figured that out, and some people didn't. But good to hear. No, like I said, the hard part, they won the election. The hard part is actually going to get a contract and seeing if it's going to be a partnership agreement where the owners understand that having the buy-in from the players going to help them move forward, or an adversarial relationship where you're going to be butting heads. And then there I look at what's going on at Starbucks because there's some audio that just has been released of Starbucks CEO Howard Schultz. Now remember, Howie here, he had Hillary Clinton been elected, could have been labor secretary. So it's really disheartening to see how anti-labor Howie is. How the liberal bastion of the latte drinking crowd, not so much when it becomes their workers, but he was asked if he could ever see himself embracing the union at Starbucks, and it was a blunt no. which, got to tell you, it is, that's against the law. And you would think someone as smart as Howie would know that. Right now, you've got nearly 300 stores that are organizing and organized. And at some point, you're going to hit a critical mass where it's going to have to be something. And, I guess right now there are 140 that have won their elections. They're going to have to start sitting down and at least pretending to negotiate like most employers do. There has to be this idea that means how the law reads that employers must confer in good faith with respect to wages, hours, and other terms and conditions of employment. They at least have to make a good faith effort or the appearance of one. So when you come out and say, no, not going to happen. When you come out and you say, we're in business to exceed the expectations of our customers. He said 100 million people come into Starbucks. The customer experience will be significantly challenged, and less than if a third party is integrated into our business. No, they don't want a third party. They're happy with them being in complete and total dictatorial control. They don't want to have to answer to anyone. And this is where, benevolent dictators like Howie, who are used to hiring and firing at will, have to then get used to there's no more at-will employment. And this is what I say all the time is the best thing about having a union contract. You can't be fired for no reason. Just cause is the future employment. You have to be fired for a reason. Now, it doesn't mean you can't be fired. It means you got to have a reason. And it better be a good one. It better not be, I just don't like you. That's not a reason. Or, you looked at me funny today, I don't like you. That's not a good reason. My brother-in-law needs a job. That's another not good reason. So in this world, Howie's going to have himself a problem. Because like many people today, I sent this video to the general counsel of the NLRB, Jennifer Abruzzo, with the statement, Exhibit A, Your Honor, because I view this as something not legal. And, this is the interesting moment is these employers feel emboldened. The law has been so far skewed to their side. The power of breaking unions, the power of denying workers their rights has been so skewed that they're emboldened to come out and say, no, we're not going to do it. And there being no recourse. This is the number one reason I voted for Joe Biden. The fact that we have a worker-friendly National Labor Relations Board and a worker-friendly National Labor Relations Board General Counsel who will read the letter of the law and say this is a violation. And at some point, maybe we get to the point to where Howie here and the rest of the folks at Starbucks who will go through this dance because their union busting lawyers tell them how to go and drag this process out for as long as they possibly can without actually negotiating a contract. Eventually they will be held accountable. That's the hope. Because this is how we built the most prosperous working class in the history of civilization at one point in this country. That's how my grandparents' generation did it. They sat down, they hammered out agreements. They demanded better. And right now we're in a moment in our history, we're at a second in time where workers are saying, enough already. You told us we were heroes. You told us we were patriotic. You told us we were essential. Now treat us that way. Give us the dignity and respect that you claim we deserve. And that comes with livable wages. That comes with decent benefits. And that comes with safe working conditions, whether you're on a football field or you're serving coffee at a Starbucks. Dignity and respect, doesn't matter what you do for a living. You deserve it. Just my thoughts. I'd love to hear yours. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you miss any of today's program or any of our programs, make sure you grab the podcast. Always there, always available. Go to thericksmithshow.com, find it there. or wherever you get your favorite podcasts, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, and everywhere in between. It's always there. Make sure you grab it, share it, like it, subscribe, make comments, all of that. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.